Hey, strong people, Kalle Beck here, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Strong Talk podcast. Coming up on Christmas and the holidays, and I just want to say I appreciate all of you for listening. It's been a blast since the new format of the show and starting it back up. Of course, this show is brought to you by StartingStrongman.com. Lots of news in Strongman right now. The list of the Arnold athletes for the Arnold Pro just came out. And let's run it down. That's, of course, at startingstrongman.com if you go to the news. And we have, Hafthor Bjornsson, Zach Hodge, Rano Henley of Estonia. I think he's a little lesser known, but he's a dark horse for sure. He's strong. I don't know if anyone saw him at the Kaz Classic, deadlift 900 pounds, but do not count him out. Mateusz Kilkowski of Poland, Vititas Lawless, former winner. Krzysztof Radzikowski is back in the Arnold from Poland. He'll be big in the mix. Dimitar Savatinov, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with. Zydrunas Savickas is competing again, so we'll see how Lean Z does. It'll be interesting to see after he got 7th at the Ultimate Strongman how he ramps up to train for he's. I really don't see anyone ever besting his 7 or 8 Arnold Classic victories. And we have Mikhail Shivlikov of Russia and Brian Shaw of the United States. The events I don't think are out yet, and something to note is that it's now called the Arnold Pro Strongman World Series, right? So it says it's a new professional sports league that features the world's best strongman competing around the globe for the right to compete in the Arnold Strongman World Championship. It's kind of confusing, but how it's now working, where the past Arnold, when there was just the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, this is how I take it, how it's done, is there was, so there was only the Arnold Classic, so then invites were sent out and there was some sort of qualifying standard. Now that they have Arnolds all over the world, Australia, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, etc. And there's strongman at all of those contests. Those are, you have to compete in that, and then there's some sort of points or scoring system on then who gets, who qualifies for the Arnold Classic in Columbus, now the Arnold Pro Strongman World Series. Makes sense? So that's why it's a little unfortunate, or however you want to put it, that, why you don't see someone like Eddie Hall on the list. He's of course he broke the deadlift record last year, but then he withdrew from the whole contest, so people don't tend to like that. And, he also didn't do any of these Arnold he didn't do any of the Arnolds around the world, where, the previous year he did the Arnold Australia, but this year he didn't, so that's one of the reasons why he wouldn't be there. Another announcement, California's Strongest Woman is back. I am promoting that with my friend Clay Edgin. You can go to California's Strongest Woman to sign up if you want to compete or just help out. And if you want to sponsor the event, you can email me at kalebeck@startingstrongman.com. That's going to be live streamed. All the info is up at californiastrongestwoman.com. So go ahead. Last year we had a ton of people out and it was great. And speaking of Eddie Hall, another announcement is that now his documentary, Eddie Strongman, is on Netflix. So that's huge. I think that's going to be awesome for the sport. And I think it's going to reach a big audience. So if you haven't watched it, go and check it out. I think you'll enjoy it, even if you are not a strongman fan. It's just a well done documentary. And if you have watched it, share it with your friends and go up there, give it a 5-star rating so more people see it on Netflix. We're able to introduce a wider audience to the sport that we all love, and I think it'll do. That's just a huge platform. The number one streaming service there is now showing the documentary, and that's going to be big. And if you want any last-minute gift ideas, you can go to strongmanprogram.com. Just rolled out these strongman training templates. How it works is it's general programming using what I used as an athlete, and coaching with, I've had hundreds of clients that have all been successful, and just those sound principles put into a basic structure for strongman. This differs from one-on-one coaching because it's kind of a program to follow on your own. It also comes with a 15-page step-by-step guide on how to do the event. So I think that right there is worth it. And since you listen to this podcast, and I really appreciate the people that take the time to listen to me talk for some reason, use code STRONGTALK to get a free month. So you can go over there, sign up, get the booklet, see the structure, and cancel, and you're good. And it's only $10 a month after that. After January 31st, it's going to go up to $15. So if you want to get in on that now and have the best deal there is on solid programming for strongman out there, go to strongmanprogram.com and use code STRONGTALK to get a free month. This week's guest is Mike Bartos. Mike Bartos is probably most well known for inventing the Stone of Steel, the world's first good loadable Atlas stone. And so we talk about that. I think Mike's a very interesting guy, and you can go to mbpowercenter.com to check out all of his products, and it's MB Power Center on Instagram and Michael Bartos on Facebook. He's a good guy. I really enjoyed this. I think he has a lot of insight, and he gives some, not just into his equipment, but his philosophies on training. And he just wants to make cool stuff, and he's been he wants to then not just make it for just his gym, but for everyone else. And if you're competing in Strongman Corporation shows, then you probably got pretty accustomed to his equipment. And I think you'll enjoy getting to know the man behind the equipment a little bit more. So without further ado, listen to my talk with co-host Michael Battolino at Chrono Strength and Mike Bartos. Welcome to Strong Talk Podcast. Beck here, joined by Mike Battolino and Mike Bartos of MB Power Center Equipment. Mike Bartos, Strongman Equipment. What is the actual official name? I just call it like the Stone of Steel and everything. But what's like the official business title you have for your equipment line, Mike?
Well, the official business line is actually just Power Center.
Okay.
And that's the name of the product line. The website is actually the name's encompassing of my gym and the equipment business.
Okay, so you have the gym, which is the Power Center, and your equipment line is Power Center. But I like that it gives that feel where you're like, this is the Mike Bartos Power Center. Just putting your little stamp on it. It fits well. It kind of rolls off the tongue. But I think, Mike, you're most well known for creating the Stone of Steel. For some people could say for better, or for people use it. Some people they're mad that you took their tacky away, which I don't think you did, but people like to complain. So I think it'll be I just want to know how did you? So you started you have the gym first, and that's the main thing, and then you developed the equipment line. So when was it that you just got into actually, you have a gym and you want to have even more on your plate? I know running a gym is enough in itself. So what gave you, were you always wanting to build stuff as a kid, or just something came to you and then you had to figure it out?
Well, I think as far as with the equipment line kind of was born out of necessity. I fell in love with training when I was very young. I was an overweight kid. I was 250 pounds by the time I was in 7th grade, and decided I was going to make some changes for myself. So I started exercising just for the sake of getting better at sports. And I had a brother that was a great Division I college athlete, and I really looked up to him, and would have liked to be a little bit more along the lines of where he was physically. So I started training, and by the time I got into high school, I had lost over 100 pounds. Really, with I had a wonderful family, but not tons of exercise guidance. Just basically going into my parents' basement and doing things as hard as I could. And so my love of training has been around for a very long time, for right now, but more than half of my life. So as time went on, I had the gym, and it was always my dream to have a gym. I fell in love with training young athletes. Even right now at my gym, 95% of the client base are junior high and high school kids. And so working with that age, these are kids that are extremely impressionable. And, I have a tremendous duty, I feel, to pass on my love to training to them, as well as helping them not only physically, but hopefully help them have a wonderful life. So as the gym continued to grow, I started having ideas for pieces of equipment that came out of necessity of what we needed right here at the gym. And that's really where all of our products are born. And I think that's what's really cool about this is when we build a product, we're not making something and saying, oh, let's try and find something that a million people are going to like. We find things and say, hey, there's unique issues in our gym that we would like to be able to improve. And if that's a thing that other people would like, then I guess we would put it up on the site and hopefully try and help some other people out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been to gyms all over this country, and especially with strongman, you see these cool pieces of equipment at different gyms that they made, or they have a member that's a welder that made, and you're like, I wish I could get one, but they only made one. They didn't actually market it. So I think, yeah, that's cool that you're going to actually share some of the stuff you came up with and, help other people. Because if I've found usually if one person has an issue or a need for something, then usually someone else somewhere is going to benefit from it as well. And it's a lot more work to actually do that instead of just making the one or the couple for your gym and keeping it all in house. And almost it would give your gym a little bit more, you would have cooler stuff versus everyone. So it kind of would set it apart that way. But yeah, I think it's cool that you decided to give everyone the same opportunities when you already put in the hard work to make that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things is in my position, loving training as much as I do, I think, I'll be hooked to this for the rest of my life. It puts me in a really nice situation where when we are coming up with things, it's things I think that'll resonate with the strength community just for the sake of we're so heavily involved in the strength community. And everyone at our gym trains very hard, myself, my wife, and everybody associated, and obviously all my kids and clients. But we're kind of smack dab right in the middle of the training community. And so I think it actually makes making the equipment a little bit easier because we're not pulling things out of thin air. We're right in the middle of it and having the same issues and the same successes and the same failures as just about everybody else.
Sure. And I'm pretty sure that you're, heavily, like, your training style is, like West Side Conjugate influenced from what I could gather. And that's very similar to how Louis Simmons is, like, all the stuff he made. He's like, well, I needed to do this, or this piece of equipment wasn't like that. So he made stuff like, the reverse hyper and all his other creations. So yeah, it's very, very in the same kind of line like that, the same style.
Yeah, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, so we're about 2.5 hours north of West Side. And I was never a regular at West Side, but just in going to powerlifting meets as a young guy, I got invited down there as a teenager, and really just had a wonderful experience. With Louis, I think what a lot of people that don't know Louis, and I haven't talked to Louis in many years, but just coming from my perspective as being a young guy around him, I think what a lot of people don't realize about him is he is tremendously giving with his knowledge, and he truly wants to make things better. And I look at people like him in the strength community as role models for myself and the way that I want our business to be. A tremendous part of our drive and our desire to improve is to make this better than we found it. And so, yeah, certainly I look at a guy like him is certainly somebody that's been around for 50 years now and, a role model in the way we would like to be able to do things and help people.
You're gonna go in line and get the same kind of, tattoos. It's funny because you're very different. Like your personalities are so different, but you can tell like the approach and everything's similar. Which is one of the things.
I definitely think the personalities are different.
Just a tad, just a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't normally take pictures of the axe tattoos that you have on your chest, right? You haven't taken any pictures of those in a while.
They are there,
I
though.
Think, with him, you guys have never seen me without my shirt on. That but these guys, they even like with Louis, I think a lot of people could look at him, and say, oh, he's all covered in his axe tattoos and all that. But in my impression, I was a young boy when I was going down there, 16, 17 years old. I think maybe even 15 the first time I was down there. And at 15 years old, that can be an intimidating place. And it wasn't like my dad isn't like my dad was a Division I college athlete himself and all that, and he was very supportive of everything my entire life. But he wasn't one of those hold my hand type parents and walk me into every situation and kind of coddle me. And so my first time I was down there, I was 15, and he dropped me off and he's like, "Oh, this is your thing. Go inside and train." And he sat out in the parking lot. And, and here I'm this young kid, and I remember my heart rate was probably like 200 walking in, just nervous as could be. And, but I think even with a guy like Louis, you talk about the tattoos and all that kind of stuff, but I think for him, I think he's about as nice and open, as caring as possible if you're actually there to get better. And I think that's one of those things where if you get past looks, I think he's a good guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anyone who puts out information is they're trying to make a better place to lift, or however you want to put it, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, and I have lots of friends that visit, and he's the kind of guy, he'll like once they come, he'll call you weeks later and go, "How's your deadlift?" or something, and just talk to you. And like and when they were there, he bought them breakfast. It's just trained them, didn't charge any gym fee. So, it's commendable. And, you look at stuff like that and, yeah, it's awesome. But more about Mike. So you got into training. I assume that, like you said, you got better, you started lifting and stuff to get better at sports, but then you're like, it seems like a lot of us, meathead types were like, okay, sports are fun. It's good to be better at them. But the thing I really like is the training for the sport. You like the weight room, being in the weight room. Is that how you were?
Oh, I loved, when I played high school sports like football and everything, I was all in and, and obviously try as hard as I can and all about our team and everything. But there was always a part of me that when the season ended, I would think, all right, I have 6 months to just train now. And, so certainly, even by the time I was 18 years old, obviously I wasn't a all-American football player, with the opportunity to go to big schools like Ohio State or anything like that, but opportunities to go to smaller schools to play. And I actually passed all that up because my love of training was so great. I didn't want anything to interfere with it. And so, yeah, I think that was definitely a similar experience a lot of us share. Is as a young kid, I think I was always saying that I was going to try and train for a sport, but deep down inside, I just liked being in the weight room.
Yeah, and the sport kind of gives you a reason to be in the weight room in a way. Like, it wasn't so much how it is now, where you see with like how social media has kind of blown up stuff like powerlifting or CrossFit or even strongman. Is I think kids now, they can look and they go, okay, I can aspire to be that. Where weight, there was like a little bit of stuff about powerlifting and stuff, but really not really. I think we're roughly the same age. We dig for information, but it was hard to find. So that was kind of the only outlet you had. You're like, okay, I have to train this, and how am I going to showcase these skills? You have to do a traditional sport. But I think that's...
Yeah, absolutely. I think with social media, I see, even with me working with kids right now, I see a tremendous difference, even in the approach from a training standpoint, like you said, where there's tons of information out there and you almost get flooded with things. Mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a good thing because there's so much out there to help people. But, I know a lot of people sharing this thought is it can almost be information overload for somebody that's young and starting out. When I was first starting my training, a lot of my decisions were based on just, is this hard or not?
Yeah.
And if I felt like it was tough and it was going to challenge me, then I would do it, and I would do it as long as I could until I made progress, and then try and find something else that was hard. But I think for a young kid right now that's maybe 16 or 17 years old, they could read about 15 or 20 different methods and not really get the underlying fact that all those methods are based around sound principles. And if you create a training program around sound principles, I think some will be better than others, people in particular. But I think if you get a young kid starting out and you adhere to a basic program with gradual progressive overload, make sure they're eating, make sure they're sleeping, and make sure that, the training is consistent, they're going to make tons of progress. And so that's a big thing we try and do with kids at my gym is cut through the noise for them and keep things basic and ride out as basic of a program as we possibly can until progress would stall, and then start bringing in a different stimulus.
Yeah, it's always easier to add. You can throw everything at the wall, and then there's nowhere to go from there. That's what I found as well. Is and sometimes I'll have that where I'll send programming to a new athlete, and they're like, well, it looks really simple. I'm like, well, yeah, it is simple. If the more complicated it is, the harder it is to follow, and the longer you're going to be in the gym for what? Like, that's why, like, I try to stay away from like I even say, like, when I'm, selling programming or something, I'm like, this isn't a method. This is programming. This is training, and it's just sound principles. It's not some fancy name or anything, even though that would probably sell better, but it's just
absolutely.
Yeah, but just keep it simple.
I think as a young guy, like right around the time that people started posting training logs on the internet,
mm-hmm.
I was amazed when I was, say, 17 years old or 18 years old, and some of these forums started popping up, and I would look at the training of these elite level guys, and I'd be like, I mean, this is coming from the perspective of an 18-year-old kid. I'd be like, man, are these guys lazy? Like, they're doing 4 exercises or 3 exercises, then going home. And, over the past 10 years, I've realized that, they had it figured out. They put a lot of effort into exactly what they needed. And if it wasn't going to yield a big result for them, then why waste your time and cut into recovery and waste the energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, like, even as I think when I was younger and had a ton of time to spend in the gym and stuff, I'd just go in and I'm doing everything just because you enjoy doing it. But then, like, you've trained for over 10 years, you're just kind of like, okay, I just want to go do 3 movements and just be done. I know. Yeah, just like 3-4 movements and you're done, and then just worry about the next one. Like, at some point you're throwing stuff at the wall just to, like, because you're hoping it's going to keep adding, where, it just doesn't need to be that complicated.
Yeah, and I think personality type really comes into it as well.
Absolutely.
Like, when you really think about discipline and training, I have the opportunity with my gym to really see all spectrums. I have kids that come to the gym and maybe they're really young, and I would say by the time most kids in my gym are older years of high school, they bought into training so much and it's a lifestyle for them after they've been around for at least a little while. But sometimes you have younger kids coming in, they're nervous coming into the gym, they really don't know what's going on, and I would say maybe even the first couple of times they're training, they're not necessarily in love with it. And so for them, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline just to get up, get mom or dad's car, come to the gym, and get through their training session. But I think when you have a personality type that's where you really love training, and I mean, you really, really love it, I think sometimes the discipline is to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be disciplined enough to not keep doing things. And that's, from my perspective, I could speak 100% in my personal experience of training, is I love pushing very hard. And, I like the feeling of beating myself up. And so sometimes saying that 2 or 3 sets on something is going to get the job done is hard for me, as opposed to saying, let's not just keep banging for 5 more sets. But I know if I do that, I'm probably not going to be walking for 2 weeks, and the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's I totally agree with and almost also, like, different kind of training plans I've found work good depending on the type of person someone is. Like, if you want to take a varied approach, like West Side or Conjugate, if someone, like, they love, like, geeking out on, like, how to set up different bands and doing different variations and learning everything, then that's probably going to be a better program for them, I believe, just because it'll keep them they're going to keep enjoying training. Whether you want to say if, a bunch of variation is better, like, as far as, how research goes or anything, but if you're actually enjoying training and, staying with it, I think that's the main objective. And then there's some people that just like to really They want to just master a couple things. They want to keep it simple, or it kind of goes down to how your mindset is. And I think it really works to also what kind of sport, which one of the strength sports you're going to want to adapt. Not just like how your body type is, but if you want to just focus on 3 lifts, then powerlifting is going to probably be more enjoyable for you. And then some people just, like for myself, I get bored if all I do is squat, bench, and deadlift. I want to go move some farmers and stuff like that. So that's why I found strongman. But I hate when people get into like this is better or that's better, and I just think that there's there's something that fits everyone, and how their mind works and what they're actually going to enjoy.
I think a big part of that, Cal, is, and I preach this to people all the time, is the side of enjoying it, but also believing in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard if you have doubts. So say if you're going to get ready for a powerlifting meet, weightlifting, strongman, it really doesn't matter. And you map out 10, 12, or 16 weeks of a training program, and you have doubt when you map that training out, it's never going to be as successful as if you're totally bought in. Sure. And so, to touch on, a guy like Louis that we talked about earlier, I mean, my goodness, do you think he bought in a little bit?
just a tad.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's part of the beauty of a guy like him. I think even if you don't agree with somebody 100%, there's so much to learn from everybody. And when you look at somebody that's at a really high level, there's really not going to be much doubt. The self-confidence is going to be so high that they truly believe how they're training. They truly believe in how they're eating and recovery methods and all that. And I really think believing is a very big part of the equation. And I think that's why sometimes when you do get the information overload, you have a tendency to start questioning what you're doing. And I don't care who you are. If you're trying to pull 100%, 1 rep max on a deadlift, and you have a little bit of doubt in your mind, it's probably not going to happen.
No.
And so I think the belief and having fun as well at the same time, I think that's another factor that a lot of people miss out on. And I've missed out on it at points in my life when I've gotten extremely busy with running the gym and running the equipment business, is I've had periods of time where I've really lost the fact that, hey, this is all supposed to be fun in the end. And so I need to find a way to make it fun, whether it's challenging myself to a new goal or maybe even cutting back on the goals at certain times when, you're short on sleep. It's not going to make the training experience pleasurable.
Yeah, I've found, and that's one of the reasons why I stopped competing right when I launched starting Strongman, is because I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to focus a lot of energy on this right now, because I don't even know what it was going to be. I just knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know what direction it was going to take. And I knew how I would put everything into my training, and that's all I focused on. I knew I couldn't do both. It wasn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So, and then once it's kind of everything settled, you can kind of find a balance and go from there. So going into that, let's go into the power center equipment. What was I don't know, but what was the first concept you had to make something, and how did that turn out?
Well, I started dabbling with pieces of equipment probably just about 5 years ago now, and it wasn't the stone and steel. I started making a device. We still use it in the gym on a fairly regular basis, but it was a quick release device. You attach it to a barbell, and it's plate loaded. And I wasn't 100% happy with the final result, but a quick release device where you pull against the bar. It was for deadlifting and power cleans and whatnot. You pull against the bar. There's additional weight on the bar. It's on a lever, and as you lift, the lever comes off and eventually falls off the bar. And you have a contrast. You go from a heavier load to a lighter load. And just by slowing down the beginning of the movement, it allows you to eventually manifest more force, just because, obviously it takes time to produce force. So it would slow the barbell down at the bottom of the lift and ultimately allow you to produce more force. We've had that in the gym for just about 5 years now. And I've actually seen and spoken with people that have had similar ideas that were much better than mine. But after that, the stone has been around for quite a while. That was actually next up. We started working that just about 4 years ago. So when we did start making that, I guess the initial stages were at the time I was training with a guy, and he was relatively new to strongman training. And so we were up here in the gym, and most of my stones were too heavy for him, and we only had one that he could handle at 240 pounds. And as he was lifting it, he dropped it, ended up twisting a little bit, and it broke. And so he goes to me, what do we have to do to make another stone? And at the time, I didn't have any molds to make another 18-inch. So I told him we have to buy another mold and all that. And, kind of like a light bulb hit me of there has to be an efficient way to not have to make a new concrete stone every time. And that kind of tied directly into my experience growing up in powerlifting. My mind works around barbell principles. And so with stone training, one of the problems I was running into is, 30 or 40 pound gaps between stones.
At
It really
least.
didn't lend itself to a slow, gradual progression very well.
No. Yeah, that's
at least that much.
I think, and that's one of the things where I think why, because, equipment access, since I got into the sport has grown, it's exploded. But like when I got into the sport, the approach was you do a powerlifting routine through the week, just normally like you're going to do powerlifting. Then on the weekend you practice events. And I think that's kind of because there was just such little access to equipment in general. And so it's like you can't like you said, you can't progressively overload stones. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to go play with the 300-pound stone for as many as I can. This one, so you can't apply like the same sound principles that you will for training. Or, you have a 600-pound tire and a 900-pound tire. Like, what are you going to do there? And the same thing, like even a lot of the first equipment with logs, they'd be like, the empty log might be 230 pounds. So, it's hard to warm up. But now, there's just so much more access that you can kind of take a better approach to strongman training. Because more gyms have more access. They have like 50 stones in a corner, or one of the stone of steel, or a yoke that's only 150 or 200 pounds empty. Logs that are progressively loadable, and that's why I think we've seen such progress, because people are actually training with the focus on the actual competition events instead of working their box squat to hopefully then it helps them bridge that 40-pound gap in their stones that they have.
I'm in total agreement. I mean, even when I was younger, as a college age kid, I would with my training partners, we would drive an hour and a half or 2 hours on a weekend to go find somebody that had a log and farmer's handles.
Yep.
And that was a regular thing, and it kind of worked out. We would go to a contest, we would meet people, find out where they lived, and then maybe every 2 or 3 weeks make a trip to see them. But the training was 100%, even when training for strongman and not powerlifting, was pretty much 100% barbell based.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly has changed. And I think when you see people right now, that there's so much more access to implements and there's so much more opportunity for specificity. I think that's one of the reasons why numbers are going through the roof.
Absolutely.
I mean, my goodness, is just the amount of time they have to practice. And of course, I think of, pressing a barbell overhead, of course, you're going to get a big transfer to a log. But I think what people don't realize is that, that log is, I think people realize it now, but I think that log is still, you can still incrementally load it. You can still train it consistently, and it doesn't have to be a barbell all the time. And if you're pressing a 300-pound log overhead for reps, you're still going to get pretty dang strong.
Kale, what did Cass say a couple weeks ago? How many times in his life did he ever touch a log? Like, I think he said 8. That's all he ever did log in his life.
Yeah, and it was
He did it 8 times.
He was saying, if I would have had a steel log that was balanced and able to train with it multiple times a week like everyone now, maybe I would have hit, I probably would have hit 450, maybe 500, and you don't know. It's very possible. His gym numbers were comparable to people that are like in the bench and stuff, that people that are doing movements like that. So it's possible. And and it's one of the reasons why, like, you look back and some of the old World's Strongest Man, they're doing similar weights to like when I competed at 175, and it was just a different thing. I'm in no way am I as strong as those people competing in any regard, but it was just no one was training specific. It wasn't really until Yoko Ahola where he actually was like, maybe if I want to get good at these 5 things I'm going to have to do, I'm going to focus my training on these 5 things. Yeah. So
Yeah, of course, and I think that's where, from the standpoint of periodization, there's a time and a place for everything. I think, I've seen a recent article that was put out about strength standards for
yes.
strongman, and I was taking a look at it the other day, and I think specificity is obviously a requirement, but I think specificity after a big general base becomes more and more important, because I think if you can't deadlift 700 pounds, you're going to have a really hard time carrying a yoke with Zadrunas and all these guys, no matter what. You just don't have the absolute strength to do it. It's going to be a challenge for you, I think. But once these guys do have this tremendous base, I think specificity becomes even more and more important, because I'm almost certain you can get the best powerlifters in the world, guys that are squatting 1,000 pounds, and say a Ray Williams just squatted 1,005. He could probably do some damage on a yoke, but he's going to have to train it a little while to keep up with the best guys in the world, even though his legs and back are probably, from the standpoint of the general training, much stronger.
Yeah, you have to take you have to take your athletic base and strength that you've built from whatever discipline you've done, and then be able to learn the new skill and be able to apply your existing strengths to that skill. It's one of the reasons why you look and someone like, let's take, my good friend Robert Oberst, he comes into strongman and people are like, how'd he progress so quick? And he's like, well, he's been lifting weights and playing football for his whole life, and he's a giant human. So he's almost making newbie gains on the log, even though the first time he touches is at 335. He still hasn't perfected the technique. He still hasn't applied it. And then that's why he's going to get over 400, within 6 months, because he has all the base to be a 400 plus pound log press right off the bat. He hasn't, that's already been built. And same thing for if you took someone like Ray Williams. It's like, he's going to do something impressive, but then it's going to shoot up quick within the first 6 months if you actually train specifically for that. And I think the same thing with, strongman going to powerlifting. You take those same skills, then you just have to apply the competition standards for the lifts, and they're probably going to perform well.
Absolutely. Strongman is a sport, the same way football or anything else.
Yep. Do you think that some of the athletes almost, because you see, especially, and this goes into like the Stone of Steel, now that it's, in Strongman Corporation, events, it ends up almost being at every event. So then everyone gets it, and they're training on that specifically and stuff. So there almost ends up, if people are too, like, they're used to like one, organization, or like, let's say, like the path for me, like how I did it is, I'd compete at a local show, I'd do nationals, I'd do the Arnold. That was like your goal year round, right? So if you're doing that, you might end up having very similar events. Okay, because they're structured similar. So you can end up training very specifically. And I know, talking to some athletes, they end up doing stuff like, well, I don't even barely squat, I just yoke run, because they've already built up whatever their squat is. But then you see, let's say that athlete they qualify for worlds or some overseas contest, then it has a squat, and then they're screwed. So do you think that sometimes the athletes might almost, they worry too specifically about contests and then not building up that base, because, there's certain strongman contests end up running in trends, but the great thing about strongman is it can be everything. So you kind of need to keep building up all of your skills in general. Do you get what I'm saying with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think obviously if it works for somebody, it works for somebody, but I would advise against making your training so one-dimensional that you ever cut anything totally out of it for an extended period of time. I think if you go 6 months without squatting, and then you do run into a squat, obviously you're going to have some challenges. But I think if you are pushing a yoke really hard, cutting back on the volume of the squat could be a good idea.
Yeah.
And even if you cut it out for the last couple of weeks before a contest, that could be a good idea. But almost coming to realize that there's only so much room to put things in. And so when you continue putting things in, eventually something's going to have to come out. But then you really have to have the risk to reward of, if I pull it all the way out, is it eventually going to hurt me? And I think that's the beauty of strongman. I think that's why so many people are attracted to it, is because it's not the same thing all the time, and the training stays fresh. And I think people really enjoy challenges. And I think that going to different shows, and you could have a guy that dominates all 5 events at a show, but the next show he signs up for might be 2 of his worst events that are slated to be contested. And it really pushes them to continue getting better all around. And I think that's one of the big appeals of strongman.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I enjoy it. So yeah, let's get back a little bit more into so you come up with the idea that you want to incrementally, you want a stone that could be actually loadable and not have, you're a gym owner and housing stones, and I think stones are great and concrete stones are great, but like even just training, like they took up a giant part of my yard. It was kind of annoying. Like they used to just line my whole driveway. I had 12 stones there. And then you get tacky everywhere, and especially as a gym owner, I don't think there's anything worse than tacky. So you have this idea to make a loadable stone. Let's just go through that headache.
Well, I mean, the process was tough. Going into this, when I initially had the idea, I drew a rough sketch of what I wanted, and I said, oh, this really isn't going to be that big of a challenge. I could get this together pretty quick. Then 3 years went by, and I realized that it was a little bit of a challenge. I think the entire process, I'm very thankful for the entire process, because I almost think it was an education for me. Coming in, I was a gym owner. I didn't have that much experience, virtually no experience besides making a couple of small pieces at my gym of, steel or fabrication or anything like that. So it took quite a bit of persistence. And I think I was under the impression that I could just call, pretty much anybody and find these pieces, which wasn't the case. So I think there were 2 big challenges. And I think the first challenge was finding what design was going to be, which design was going to work best. I wanted something that was really efficient. And so the first actual drawing that I had was nowhere close to what we finished up with. But in the process, it kind of happened, and I guess you would almost say organically, where we would build a prototype and it would break. And we would say, okay, what could we do to improve this, to eliminate that? And then we would do it. And then something else would go on it. And, small changes happened a little bit at a time. Then actually, when we did get to a point where we had a design that we felt comfortable with, one of the big challenges is finding who was actually going to be able to, not even the steel fabrication, because we had people that we were working with, but who was actually going to be able to get us these hemispheres, at a price that we could need. And that became just about a year process. Once I decide I want to do something, I could get very single-minded. And so it was actually the number between all of the companies we called was 611 was the total. I kept a notebook and marked everything down. But, it was a couple phone calls a day for just about a year. And, after the actual final piece was made, and continued to push with that until we could find it. And we were done. I tell you, it was a cool experience. Like I said, it was an education. And at the same time, even though it was tough at some points, I wouldn't change it. And I'm thankful for a little bit of a headache.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think steel, from what I can gather, it's fairly simple until it starts to get round. There's a lot more involved with it. Like you can make like farmer's walk yoke. They're nice angles and flat pieces, but when you start getting into like making things round out of steel that also have to be able to support a tremendous load, it seems to be a pain in the ass.
Absolutely, and that's where with this, as we were designing this, I think when you make a piece, like you said, farmer's handles or a yoke or whatnot, it could be pretty straightforward. And even some of our other pieces, like our deadlift platforms and our jack stands and all that, the prototyping was very limited in those pieces, because I already conceptually had an idea of exactly what I wanted them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we would make a couple pieces, decide that we wanted to change something or a certain dimension on it, and within 2 or 3, we had the final product of of the way we wanted it to be. But with this, I really didn't know how things were going to work. And the problem is when you're buying these things and you're buying them in small quantities for prototypes, it gets pretty expensive. And then aside from that, you would get through something, it would break, and you really have no guarantee that the next one's going to work either. But yeah, once you start getting into unique shapes and structures, it definitely adds a new dimension in.
So what was the biggest hurdle that you had with it? Was it figuring out like how it can be two pieces and still be structurally sound and hold up where it threads together, or what was the thing where you did and then it finally clicked and you're like, okay, now we have what we have now?
The problem we were running into is actually creating something that was going to be able to take the abuse of strongman was a challenge. And so we started building internal structures using different gauge steel on the hemispheres. But the problem is when we were building these internal structures, it was taking up so much space that we weren't able to get that many plates in compared to what we would like to be able to get in. And so obviously structurally was a big challenge. But then also, like I touched on earlier, is finding these things at a price that they could actually work, as far as getting them out there to be able to help people in their training. I think our first couple people that we contacted as far as getting these things made were over $1,000 a hemisphere to
just the raw
actually
materials.
get these things formed in just the raw material in small quantities. And so that, I would say that was a big challenge, because when you're speaking with people on the phone and you're talking about a strongman implement you want to make, nobody really knows what you're talking about.
No.
And so they would just kind of give you the price. And looking back on it, I think a couple people really didn't know what we were talking about. But, I structurally, it was a challenge just because, we would run into problems like we would use a certain gauge steel. We would have the big structure on the inside that was holding up, not being able to get plates in it, like I said. But then even small things like getting our handle to thread into the top, we spent almost a year struggling to get the lid on and off, on these prototypes we were making. But I think even small touches like that really make it an efficient piece. And like I said, I mean, I'm thankful for the challenges that we had with it. But really looking back, I mean, we had a lot of fun too. My wife is extremely supportive of everything, so we would always look forward to getting the next one in and test it out and see how everything went.
Yeah, and Mike, you have one. How's so I obviously the thing.
What don't I have?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you end up you're a big fanboy of everything. I think right when it came out was like right when I tore my biceps, where I think I don't think tackuless stones or the stone of steel is necessarily hard on the bicep, but I think once you've had some bicep issues, it's a little tougher to do that type of training. I loaded one once, like 6 months ago at a seminar, and I like the feel of it. And I can tell looking at it, but it was still like, it pulls on that tendon still, which is repaired. And I'm not really trying to push anything like that right now. But so how has it helped your training, Mike, as far as using that versus all of your, concrete stones?
Well, once I found out that we were going to use it in Brian's competition in July, and then they were going to use it in Jacksonville, I said, man, I might as well just buy one. So, I bought the Stone of Steel and I started messing with it. And I think the first time I used it was in at Dave Hamilton's gym in Carrollton, and I think I hit 260. I was like, man, I need one of these for my own house. So I bought one and did a lot of singles for a while, and then eventually it just clicked, and I was like, I really enjoy training with this. And I would do a few warm-ups, and then I would load a weight in there and just do my sets and reps for that day with that one weight, and it worked out real well. And I think now that they're letting us use those tacky towels, I think it's become easier than it was, because at first people were like, man, I can't hold on to this, but now they're letting us use the tacky towels, so it makes regular stones way easier, I think.
Do you feel like
and if I could touch on,
sure,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say touch on something that Mike said is, I think really from my as a strength coach perspective, and you guys work with athletes as well. When you look at what's holding an athlete back on an individual lift, is there's usually one specific weakness. And so I think just from tacky being around so long and the traditional paradigm, I think a lot of athletes were lacking the crushing strength it took to be able to lift this thing up off the ground with no assistance.
Yeah.
And so Mike, and so for me, I think that's great. Like, in my opinion, if you have a glaring weakness, training that glaring weakness is obviously going to help you out. And so I think I've gotten really good feedback from the people that have purchased our products about, even when they do go to a contest where tacky is allowed and they're using a concrete stone, their lifting on concrete has gone through the roof, just because they filled that gap and they've seen a big increase in the crushing strength. And so therefore the other exercise goes up. And so I think that's a common experience that Mike said is not just the stone and steel, but by filling that gap in, you see huge improvement all the way around.
Yeah, I know for myself, my grip on Atlas stones was always horrible. And when you're going into, when you're getting ready for a contest and you have 12 weeks, you can't really address weaknesses like that so much. So you just kind of like, okay, well, I know if I use tacky, I'm going to be fine. So you kind of, and then it's not really a weakness if it never comes up. So like if tackless stones never come up, then how's it a weakness in your contest if you're not training them and not, don't have that crushing strength to do it. So I do agree that it did cause those weaknesses, but but yeah, I think another one of the benefits that I like about it is that they're a good diameter, because I've taught seminars, all over the country, and I'm trying to teach people how to lift, because they're, they're brand new to it, or, to training, and you're trying to teach someone how to lift a 100-pound stone. That thing's so small, you can't lift it right. Where, your product's 17 and 20 inch in diameter, and I think the 17's 100 pounds empty, about
110 pounds.
Yeah. So pretty much most anyone can just go on that and be able to lift it. And it's actually the correct diameter where it's going to cause less bicep issues, because like the problem, those little stones, I don't even think they should be around, because you have to curl them to lift them. You can't put your arms at 10 and 2 or around the sides. Like, there's going to be some flexion in your elbow lifting them no matter what. Or one of the problems I had when I was like getting up to now being able to do like stones in the 300-pound range is I had all the strength. My legs and everything to be able to lift a 20-inch stone, and I'm not a tall or big guy, but getting around, I had all the strength to lift, like, let's say a 330-pound stone or whatever, or a 300-pound stone, but it's such just a different lift when it's 20 inches. Like I had a hard time even just, straddling it and getting my arms around it. But with that, I could practice that same movement with a 140-pound stone and work up using a stone of steel, because it's loadable in 20 inches, where like the lightest 20-inch stone I could find back then is, 300 pounds or so. It's hard to learn on something that's 300 pounds.
I agree, and that was one of the factors that came into play when we were deciding on what diameters we wanted to create. Is there was definitely the side of, okay, if you're teaching somebody how to do this for the very first time, what is something that's going to be safe and effective for them? And so it's been a really great experience in my gym. I have a woman, she was a 52-year-old physician in Cleveland, and one of her goals last year was to be able to lift our 110-pound stone to the platform. Mm-hmm. And so, she was able to get in and be able to practice on a realistic diameter. And by the end of the year, she ended up lifting 140 pounds.
Nice.
And nice. There was never a point in time where there was bad technique, or never a point in time where she had to practice on something that was unrealistic to what she was going to attempt.
Yeah. And if you're just working with concrete stones with a client like that, the problem is, so you're going to have to, once they get to, like, she still wouldn't be at like a decent diameter stone to teach technique, because I think what's a 17-inch stone with straight concrete, it's 200 pounds or so.
Right around there, yes, sir.
Yeah, so and like a 16's like 175, which 16's like right where it's getting where you can kind of use proper technique unless you're a huge person. So she'd you like she'd still be you could work with stones, but you're gonna have to unlearn it once you get to that. And I think that's why like the working with those tiny stones can cause bicep problems because there's really the best way to lift them is to curl them. There's flexion in the bicep. That's why I think it's a great tool for that. But so how do you like it's in damn near every contest now, your product. I'm sure that you're proud of that, but uh, do, do you hate concrete stones? Like everyone says that you're trying to outlaw them and like banish them off the planet, or is it just like
I do not hate concrete. I think obviously I think the intention of our business, number one, is to be able to provide training and competitive aids that can really help people, and that's the whole reason we have our business. So I think with that being said, there's certainly no animosity towards anyone or anything, but I don't hate. I think in a sport like strongman, where there's so many different factors that come into play, I think one of our objectives of our business is to find new ways to challenge people, and I look at our stone as a way to challenge people. It's a great training implement, is a really efficient contest piece, just for the sake that, or the fact that you could take it to a contest at 140 or 110 pounds and pretty much accommodate everybody. So no, there's no animosity towards concrete or anything like that. And if that's certainly not the truth.
I know.
All right, I got a couple questions for you now, Mike.
Go for it.
Okay.
So, first one is, how many stones of steel are out there right now?
You know what? I don't even have an exact number, to be honest with you. That's not that's not a thing that I really even keep track of. I mean, we have our records of everything that have gone out and all that, but I couldn't even put an exact number on it.
All right. Second question. Okay. At what point are we going to have how we have like bootleg videos of World's Strongest Man every year? Like from the side, you've got a guy like, hey, check out the stone load from today, because some guy posted on his Instagram, and that's how we find out they win. So at what point are we going to see you and your wife on the sidelines at World's Strongest Man loading up Atlas stones for the Stone Series? Do you think that'll ever happen?
I mean, I don't know. I think in that, I mean, obviously that venue would be awesome.
Sure.
That would be a really good experience. And, I think, I guess you would touch on this a little bit furthermore, is like a lot of young guys, when I was a young kid, you start saying to yourself, okay, I love this stuff so much and I really want to make a difference in this.
Yeah.
I mean, I could genuinely, to the bottom of my heart, say that training has been, outside of my mother and my father and my grandma as a child, as a young man, those were training was the biggest factor that influenced my life as a young person. And that's why I love it. And that's why I want to keep being able to give it to young people in my gym, is because it means so much to me. And so I think being able to provide equipment for a venue like that and to get on that stage, I think would be excellent. And I think it would really, for me, it would make me feel like we've gotten to a point where we are giving back in at least in what we love in one of the biggest ways possible, as far as the exposure and helping that level of athlete. Whether or not we ever will, I'm not 100% sure, but I think as it catches on more and more, I mean, my goodness, if you see the weight some of these guys are lifting on this thing right now.
It's insane.
Last year at the Arnold Classic in March, there were quite a few guys that were, I mean, pretty much everybody was struggling with 375 pounds. And to me, it was a little bit confusing at the time. I don't know if it was a mental thing or if it was just a new event and guys weren't used to it, or what the factor was, because at that point in time, my training really wasn't even necessarily consistent. I was training maybe 2-3 days a week tops, just because how busy we were. But at that point in time, my best on the Stone of Steel was 390 pounds, weighing about 245 or 250 pounds. And so in my mind, I was like, man, these guys that are these heavyweight monsters are going to crush 375.
Right.
But then looking back on it, I had been training on it for a couple of years, and they didn't have the same exposure to it. But I think when you see the numbers that guys are lifting now, Martins Licis, who I actually love Martins. I think a guy like Martins is wonderful for strongman.
Who doesn't love
He's
Martins?
the best, dude. He's the best, man.
I tell you what. I mean, I think in the sport of strongman, it would make me very happy to be able to see strongman grow to a point where we have guys like Martins that are professional athletes able to get to a point where they're full-time athletes and they get the notoriety and the respect that they deserve as an athlete because he's amazing at what he does.
Absolutely.
But I think guys like Martins are so good for strongman. I think sometimes people make comments about, we need the events to look a certain way to be able to draw more people into the sport, but I don't really think it matters. I think if Martins was, lifting bags of groceries, people would want to be like him, just because he's loud and he throws his arms up in the air and he's a showman. And I think that's really what attracts people to the sport. But then he hit 460 last night, and Martins, he's out of his mind in a wonderful way. But from what I read on the internet last night, he did that 460 the same way he did his 405 in Chicago, which was, really no warming up. He helped load at the contest all day and helped out, no food or water, and then lift 460. But then just this morning, Dave Daly out in Chicago, he did 465.
Dude,
I don't think
that's awesome.
I don't know if you saw the video or not, but
Yep.
I mean, my goodness. And I think Martins was
looking
at
over it
56 inches and Dave was at 57 inches. So
he just showed him
think
up. He just showed him up just that little bit.
Little bit. And so I think it's very realistic to say that, guys are going to be exceeding 500 pounds on this very soon. And with that being said, I mean, if you look at a venue like World's Strongest Man, I think a mid 400, high 400 final Stone of Steel would be something that they train for consistently. I think it would be very possible on a 5-stone run.
So, touching more on that, you are the Stone of Steel is at the Arnold, the amateurs,
Yeah.
and I believe the pro strongwoman side this year as well.
Yes.
And the pro strongwoman side is a series, right?
Yes, we are going to do a stone series.
Yeah, and that's the first time I've seen that where you're having enough of the steel stones out there to do a series. So that'll be pretty cool to see. Yeah, so you are getting. I think that's arguably a bigger venue than World's Strongest Man in a way. There's more eyeballs on it right then. Maybe not later on because it's not televised the same. But for just people seeing it up close, there's really no bigger venue in the sport, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's a good point where you talk about the personalities because you fell in love with the sport when you were young. I did. I know Mike did. And when we talk about those moments, what do we talk about? We really don't say, oh, that log looked cool, or I mean, how they designed the sausage hold was really cool, how they painted it and they did this. Like, we don't say that. We say, we talk about like when John Paul said, the king has lost his crown, or Marius finishes, barely beats him and says yes and like slaps Derek Poundstone on the back. We talk about those moments and those characters. And that's, why you, and then you like, as like a young guy, you draw yourself, you're like, man, I could be like, imagine like, I could be like, you kind of want to have that same feeling. And I know like, certain moments, you try to replicate that to the same level and you get caught up in the moment. It's awesome. Like, let's take, the Arnold last year when, Zach Hodge, he was one of the only guys to load the stone. Like, that moment was incredible. And like, I think Flow Elite put a big, I think they did a video and a spotlight on it, but like him doing that and how emotional and like how he overcame every odd, he's the smallest guy out there, like stuff like that is what really makes the sport, in my opinion, are athletes like that and making moments like that. Yeah, it was just...
I think it's personality and positivity are the two big things that I think will continue to make strength sports grow. You talk about moments. I mean, I could, looking at from the perspective of getting young people into the sport and getting people involved and excited about it. I grew up phenomenally just in powerlifting, as a teenage kid. And so the events always look the same. Squat, bench, and deadlift, there's really not a lot of ways to change that. So when guys came along, like, just right down in Columbus, you would see Chuck Vogel pull lift. And then the next thing you know, everybody in Ohio would show up at meets and they'd want to be screaming and yelling, and they would emulate that. And Benedict Magnuson would come along when he was going back and forth with Bolton to see, who was going to break world records. I think it was 942, then 970 and 971, then, eventually 1,003. You would see those guys and the energy and the excitement around them and everyone screaming and everyone yelling. That's what I've always loved. And I think that's, as the sport continues to grow, I think, we brought Martine's name up. I think guys like him are going to kind of be at the forefront of what's going to make it grow and what's going to pull people in.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's got that very, John Paul kind of, thing about him. I could do a couple podcasts just talking about Martine's stories. Cause he's from California. I think one of the first times I ever met him, he competed at California Strongest Man, as an amateur the year I won the 200 class in 2012. And, you see him here and there, and it's just like, it wasn't one of those people that you see that come in the sport and you're like, oh, that guy's going to be one of the super, like he had a good personality, but he was undersized and hadn't, quite built his base strength. But he's so athletic and dynamic in so many ways that once now you see why he's exploded is because his base strength has caught up with that, and now he's able to any new implement he can pick up right away because he has such a big base of athleticism. He's done lots of like gymnastic stuff and all that, so it's interesting.
Absolutely. There's guys like him. Every time I look at him, I always think to myself, how did he not end up in the 3-point stance on Sunday?
Sure.
As big and athletic as he is, my goodness.
Yeah, but I think it's because he wasn't big and athletic, so big, and he was like 230 when I used to when he started. It's taken him a bit to get up here to 300 pounds, but I want to touch on I do think that the implements do matter, but it's more of like then it's a brush for the athlete to then express themselves. Like how the implements look. But I think some of the, like how, and that's why I liked when you came out with the Big Top circus dumbbell. And yeah, we've been talking for a bit, but I just want to go through all the other stuff you have and what's coming up. But I think that is, I used to get kind of annoyed when I'd see just these drum circus dumbbells, because I just don't think it shows the same thing like the old school style circus dumbbell. But the problem was they're hard to use at a show, and you got to fill them with lead shot or whatever. So you came up, probably similar design, and I think they're really cool. But do you want to touch on some of the other product line real quick?
Oh, absolutely. The obviously the look does. Obviously the look I think matters. I'm not saying that
sure.
It's irrelevant, but I'm saying that the showman I think is probably a little bit more important. But yeah, the Big Top circus dumbbell, that's one of our dumbbells. Again, it was not an easy build. It's one of the pieces where we had to have custom tooling made, and everything is made 100% custom for us. As far as the hemispheres, but the Big Top circus dumbbell is something where I think when we did make it, my original intention was to be able to actually have a circus dumbbell that looked like an original circus dumbbell, like you touched on. And I love strength history. I think anytime you really love an activity, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the people that got strength or whatever that activity is to this point to learn about them and kind of make sure their legacies don't die. So, I've spent a lot of time in my life reading about old-time circus strongman and strength performers. So it was really our goal with that to be able to create something that when it does go overhead, it has the same look as is, 150 years ago. But then also when we were making it, a lot of people did talk about, there's really no other true hemisphere on the market right now, but there's some other ones that have more of a old school look. And a lot of people did express the fact that, the loading with sand and shot wasn't super convenient, especially at a contest. And so that's why we decided to go with the 2 hemisphere and, really a similar design as our stone of steel, just, 2 of them smaller and at a different angle.
Absolutely. So, and then you have what's it called? The PR platform, which is it's just a tool that's like, has like 1,001 uses. It looks like I got, one of my,
I've always incorporated,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've always incorporated bands into our training, and I kind of looked at another thing that was out of necessity is being able to address specific weaknesses, because you could get so much out of, so say on an exercise like a deadlift, I mean, if you have a lagging muscle group, you can get so much out of doing small exercises like glute ham raises, back raises, all that stuff. But in my opinion, you still need to train in the specific range of motion that's your weakness. You still need to put an extra amount of attention to that. So we wanted to create something that, as far as the multiple band setups, as far as the the Russian deadlift attachment that goes on the back, the ability to take pins up and down like a power rack, or also use those pins for different forms of isometrics, something that no matter what your weakness was, there was a way to attack it. So that's really was the nature of that. And it's another piece that I would say in our gym, as far as total use that it gets throughout the week, I mean, a day doesn't go by where 5 or 6 people aren't training on it. That's in a small facility.
Nice. And, Mr. Battolino, you have, I think that's the only thing you're missing from the Power Center line.
I actually don't have a keg yet. I don't have the keg yet. And I'm sure I'll get one after a competition at one point. But no, I've got the dumbbell, the stone of steel, the deadlift jack stands, and sadly my yoke is still in Florida. And it's just waiting on a ride to Texas.
Yeah.
Eventually it'll get here.
Just get Alan Kalle to
And then
carry it the whole way.
I'm gonna go use it next weekend.
Okay.
When I go see my parents, so I'll give it a little bit of love.
Nice.
Do some Zercher yoke carries with it, which sucks. So
nice.
What I was gonna ask.
Then Mike, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead, bud.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But then Mike touched on the deadlift jack stands.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And that was another piece we just put out, and they're cool. We've always used block training, and it is assistance work for our main lifting here at my gym, and so it's really a cool piece. It allows you to elevate the bar to 4 different heights between 11 and 18 inches, and it eliminates obviously the use of blocks and having to move them around. But one of the things is, even like oversized wheels, is when you buy oversized wheels, if you want to move them to a different height, you're either standing on something to create somewhat of a deficit to move the bar down, or you're putting the wheels back on blocks. So we want to create something that allows for a lot of versatility in one piece. And those are going to be used at the Arnold as well. In the 13-inch deadlift will be on our jack stands.
Oh, you heard it here first.
And that's the amount of time I save, not having to, because my blocks are on the other side of my garage gym, and my blocks are heavy, and I like, pressing off of them, but deadlifting off of them, just, it's a pain to move around. You spend an extra 30 minutes, moving stuff around, and that time savings is worth it right there. Yeah. And I think,
thanks, Mike.
I think out of all your products, that's the one where you're like, why didn't anyone, like, it's just so simple. Like when I look at like, it's like, but it works. But like, yeah, the stone, people go, oh, I had this idea, and I'm like, yeah, I look at that and what, goes into it. I'm like, that's a chore.
Yeah.
But yeah, those jack stands, like I have some silver dollar deadlift boxes I had made for California's Strongest Woman last year, and I deadlifted with them this week, and I love them, but like that was the first time I've used them since California's Strongest Woman, because they are huge and they're heavy, like, they're 90 pounds a piece, and they take up a ton of room. I mean, they look cooler than the jack stands, no offense, but they're not, as far as a training tool, it's those and they're also one height, like you said. But yeah, like those jack stands are great. I've always loved pulling from multiple angles, and it works out really well. And especially, you always think of all the little details making them so they weigh 45 pounds, so they're everything's easy to add. They're not getting into some odd numbers and everything. So yeah, I think that's like such a good tool, and it has a huge crossover. If you can get that into power lifters training with them and everything, then that should be a great seller, I'd imagine.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask, when are we going to see this axle?
The axle should be done. I'm thinking right around the first of the year, and so we're doing some cool things. I'm not going to really touch on the exact thing we're doing just yet until it's out.
Sure.
But we're doing some things to really create efficiency and safety from a competitive standpoint. We're going to have two different axles that are released. The one is going to be a competition piece, and the other one will be a training piece for somebody that doesn't want the competition features on it, even though from a training perspective, it makes a lot of sense as well. But with the axles, I think really with those, we were going for something that's very attractive, very durable, but also, like all of our equipment, efficient and different. It's really with where we're at right now, we really don't have any desire to make things exactly the same as anybody else is making them. And, even from my perspective, I get a tremendous amount of enjoyment out of making new things and coming up with things and seeing them come to life. And so with the axle, it's going to be no different. And then when 2017 hits, we have quite a few things we're working on. I'm hoping in the first half of the year to be able to release somewhere around 4 to 6 new pieces in the first half of 2017.
Damn it.
That we're doing prototyping on now. And, some of them are going to be pieces that are competitive, that are going to be used in contests, but then some of them are just going to be training aids that, to address weaknesses for people at my gym and hopefully for people at other gyms as well.
Every time I think I don't need anything else.
Yeah, you're
I'm like, man, I sure could use that.
Yeah, you're gonna make Mike. You're gonna make Mike broke over here. But yeah, so you got the axle coming out. I'm sure. Yeah, you always put the unique spin. You have the smaller sized, big top dumbbell.
Yes.
So
that's going to be coming out as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and do you know a weight that one's going to be based at, or can you talk about any of that?
Well, the weight, as far as right now, it's going to be used this year in the women's contest and the women's pro show at the Arnold.
Awesome.
So, but as far as the dead weight on it right now, what it's going to be, I know it's going to be at a weight that the women could press, but I'm not 100% sure yet, just because we actually had to do a little bit of prototyping with different dimensions before we had our custom pieces made.
Of course.
So the custom pieces, we've made prototypes, but they're actually a little bit off compared to what the production pieces will be. But I think those are set to arrive. Those pieces are set to arrive at the end of the month in December. So probably within the first week of January or so, we'll be able to release them. Right
on. Yeah. What? So, you think you guys pretty much, the Power Center stuff was like the Stone of Steel was announced just last year. It seems like it's, you guys came out with, 5 products since, or early this year,
Mm-hmm.
Where it really blew up was it was going to be at the Arnold. And then, so yeah, you've definitely been busy, and look forward to, a successful 2017 and what you guys come up with. If you want to give any hints to any of the other stuff coming up, I'd be all ears. But, if not, I guess people are just going to have to stay tuned and follow you on Instagram, right?
No, absolutely. I think, what I'm really interested right now in, we're going to start creating some specialty bars.
Okay.
And, there's with our crew of guys that train with me right now, there's some weaknesses that are kind of holding them back. And so we're experimenting with some bars to help them out. And then the other piece is going to be, it's actually going to be a predominantly a piece to train hip extension and build up the posterior chain. But that's still at real early. So we only have one prototype of that made so far, and I wasn't tremendously happy with it. So I think that's something that would probably be, a little bit closer towards middle or maybe even the the last third of the year in 2017.
Awesome. You're always staying busy. I think your work ethic's something to admire. Talking with you in Texas and stuff, it's like you're like, yeah, we're gonna drive home, 10, 12 hours, but first we're in a deadlift. I'd be like, I wouldn't deadlift. You still make sure to get the training in. Even if it's a.
I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate that my wife is, she's a big part of our business. She's also a nurse, and so she works full time at a local hospital here. She's a cardiovascular nurse, but her and I, we do a lot of this stuff as far as the traveling and all that together. And there's a lot of time and a lot of effort that's put in. But if she wasn't as supportive about this and into the traveling and the late nights and all that, it certainly wouldn't be happening the way it was, because it's a lot of time and effort. But we certainly look forward to more.
Yeah, appreciate it. And yeah, look forward to, seeing you again, hopefully at the Arnold or maybe some other contest coming up. And always good talking to you. And I think, it's some good perspective for all the listeners. Give a little bit more backstory on all of these things they keep seeing in contests or, buying for their gym. And if they want to follow you or get your equipment, what's your website, Instagram, all of that stuff?
The website is mbpowercenter.com. The Instagram is @mbpowercenter. You could email us at mike@mbpowercenter.com, or really, I like talking to customers on the phone. The phone number is 330-503-8141.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Mike, of course, thanks for everyone listening. All the strong people got, cool stuff coming up with, starting Strongman and everything. And also we announced California's Strongest Woman. So entries are available for that at californiastrongestwoman.com. It's going to be in Santa Cruz again, April 15th. You got anything to add, Mr. Battolino?
The only thing I'm going to add is that I was telling Mike and Kalle that right before this, I did a Toastmasters speech. When Toastmasters is an international speaking organization, and I did this speech. I had to do the were that it was a sales speech, and I did it as if I were selling MB Power Center products. So I will upload that to the Instagram @ChronoStrength, so Mike can enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be reposted.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very sweet. But appreciate everyone listening. Go on iTunes, give a 5-star rating and review, and tell all your friends about this. And I think this one might be released a little bit before Christmas. So Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone. And let's all have a strong 2017. Thanks, Mike and Mike, for talking to me today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Sir.
Hey, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.